Hey everybody, so I'm trying something new out here. I've been really wanting to get out in the field more, and obviously social distancing is preventing that for a lot of us. So I'm also the maker of a short documentary called Monty and Rose about Chicago's endangered piping plovers, and we had about five showings canceled, upcoming showings canceled in the next few weeks. So it's been a bummer, and it's been tough to find avenues and outreach for engaging with more people to talk birding. So I thought, why not give this a try? So hence the birth of This Week in Birding. The inspiration for this is This Week in Baseball, if anybody remembers that show from the 80s and 90s, narrated by the late great announcer Mel Allen, which was a ton of fun for kids to watch on Saturday mornings. So the big news in birding this week just happened. Mayor Lightfoot closed down the lakefront areas east of Lakeshore Drive for everyone. This means we no longer have access to some of the standout hotspots for birding, really in Chicago and all of the Midwest, including the famed Magic Hedge and Montrose Point. So people are really bummed. The reaction on social media has been a mix. There are people who are, understandably disappointed because we're about to enter close to the peak of migration season in April. And people who are working on big years are going to be potentially hampered by this, and that there are going to be fewer opportunities to see the rarities that might show up at Montrose. There are some concerns about what's going to happen with the lack of data coming from Montrose and all the sightings there. It's understandable why this is happening. I think probably what's best is for people to think about looking inland at some hot spots that are a little bit further inland, and hit some local patches that are not closed off to the public. So it'll be kind of an interesting challenge and kind of an unusual spring migration season coming up. Hopefully things might get closer to some normalcy in the next several weeks, and having something like parks reopen maybe will be an option. If not, of course, let's make the best of this and see what birds we can find in our local neighborhoods. One of the big headlines over the past couple of weeks in the Chicagoland area hasn't gotten a lot of play over on the Illinois side of the border with Indiana, but over in Indiana, this is a big deal, and I think it is a big deal for all the Chicagoland region. And that is on March 16th, a common raven was sighted at Indiana Dunes State Park. And anybody who's familiar with ravens likely knows them from more northern locations, kind of in northern Michigan or Wisconsin, or if you head out east, even down along the Appalachian Mountains. This is a northern species through most of its range, which is actually around the world. They go all the way to Europe and Africa, and I believe parts of Asia as well. Northern, or at least higher altitudes. And so for a raven to show up in Indiana is a big deal. I think what's pretty cool about this story is that it's the second year in a row this has happened. And it's at the exact same place, Indiana Dunes State Park. And the person who saw it is a guy named Kyle Wichter, who's in Illinois, and he's from the west suburbs of Illinois. But the last 3 years, he's been doing the longshore bird count up at an observation tower in Indiana Dunes State Park during the spring. And so Kyle goes up to the tower every day before dawn. He's out at the tower, and last year a raven comes by, and he identifies it. And I've birded quite a bit with Kyle, so when I heard that he saw a raven, I didn't doubt it, even though if you're a Chicago birder, that could be met with some skepticism. A lot of people confuse American crows with ravens. And we just know that ravens don't really show up in this area, at least really in the last 100 years or so. So in fact, for Indiana, the last record in the state was from the early 1950s. And so Kyle reports this, how he isn't able to get a photo or a video or audio recording in time. And I believe, if I understand correctly, it was accepted as a record, or at least being reviewed. So he goes up this year, 3 years, 1 year and 3 days from the date he had seen the raven last year, and a raven starts coming in. And I had a chance to talk to him, and if I can figure it out, I might cut in some audio of that. But at any rate, he says to himself, well, I guess this is happening. He sees a raven, he sees a big black corvid coming in, and he's like, he hears it vocalized, and he's like, this is a raven. And he says to himself, well, I guess this is happening. And he runs and gets his camera. And so he proceeds to take this video of a really distant shot of a raven, and if you turn up the sound really, really high at about the 25-second mark of the video, you can hear a raven vocalizing, and this is like undeniable proof that a raven actually was present at Indiana Dunes State Park last week. So Kyle proceeds to follow the raven as it flies and lands and gets harassed about a quarter mile away by an American crow. And the story doesn't end there. So the first, finally Kyle's got documentation of a raven in Indiana. He's now seen, there've been like, I think 4 sightings in the past 100 years. He has 2 of them. And so then he, 2 days later, not 1 but 2 ravens show up, and they're calling. 2 ravens kind of come flying in from the east and fly by him toward the west. This happens again a couple days later. It's really incredible, and it's super interesting to think about what's going on here, because if you look at the ravens' range, the nearest place where they're regularly occurring is near Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is, I believe, about 150 miles away. And what they're doing down in Indiana is unclear. There has seemingly been some tendency for their range to be going a little bit farther south, but it's interesting. And then when you think about like the terrain and the topography of sort of western Michigan and Indiana Dunes, yeah, you could see some overlap there. It's not unlike these wooded dunes and super high, tall, sandy areas, all up and down from the northwest corner of Indiana all the way up to northwest Michigan and in places like Sleeping Bear Dunes. So that was pretty sweet, and I think it's an interesting story, and one I'm going to continue to track. As for Illinois, we haven't seen ravens here for a lot of years, I believe. Interestingly, the last nesting pair of ravens, it was many decades ago, and I think it was down near like Effingham, Illinois, which is kind of in the east central part of the state, strangely enough. So not a northern area at all, actually. But super interesting. And ravens, the Corvidae family, just kind of unendingly interesting as a family. I wanted to also take some time to just talk about like a few migrants that are showing up right now, even this week. The first one I'll mention, and again, if we can figure out a little bit of editing or AV here, we'll put a photo up. But the fox sparrow. So fox sparrows are large sparrows that were really at sort of the northern extent of their wintering range. Occasionally see a fox sparrow in winter around northern Illinois, but they really start coming through in numbers around now. Like the last week of March is a great time to see fox sparrows, and if you're fortunate enough, you'll be in kind of a patch of woods with a nice thick layer of leaf litter, and they'll just be turning over leaves and scratching, and I've been in places where you're surrounded by maybe a couple dozen of these birds, and you just hear them. You don't even have to really see them. They're just you just hear them scratching and throwing leaves around as they come through and make their way through the woods around here. The neat thing about them and so many migrants is how far they go. I mean, fox sparrows end up nesting in places like along the Hudson Bay of Canada. So they're a long ways to go still yet, and they're coming through here They're kind of early on their journey, actually, um, as they head to their northern breeding grounds. This is also a great time of year to see waterfowl. Waterfowl are kind of the wintering waterfowl are sort of making their last stand here, and I've got a couple of pictures of some local favorites that have been seen around the area lately. American widgeon is one. Another one or two are the greater and lesser scaup species. I think the photo that I'm going to try to show is a lesser scaup. But waterfowl are making their way through. I've had some good flights out on the lakefront. I guess not going to be able to see those lately, so head inland, or not going to be able to see those for a little while. Yeah, so waterfowl, check them out. Until we have the big waves of warblers and sparrows coming through, we sort of need to tide ourselves over with waterfowl and other birds like woodcocks, which have been around actually for a few weeks now, and killdeer are now arriving. Another one that's great to check out at this time is the eastern Phoebe. You'll see them. This is a flycatcher species that has a pretty dark head and sort of hooded almost appearance, and you'll see them. They'll be flitting and pumping their tails as they perch. You should be able to see them in a lot of local patches right now. So those are a few highlights for this week in birding. The week ending, what is it now, March 27th. If you have any thoughts on future topics or where this concept can go, I'm open to them. And if you have any questions or comments on anything I brought up, just throw them into the comments with this post. But yeah, it'll be fun to see where this could go. If nothing else, it's a nice outlet during this time of social distancing. And in the meantime, good birding, and stay healthy, and hope to see you somewhere out in the field soon.